Is a Game of Thrones movie coming to the theaters? We've got some breaking news on that information as well as what that movie might be. Let's get into it right now on the Sundowners Club. Welcome, everybody. Sterling, we cover Game of Thrones, we cover House of the Dragon, Night of the Seven Kingdoms, all things Westeros. I've even got my crown that I'm going to put on in honor of the latest news that the Hollywood Reporter is saying a Game of Thrones movie is in development, the early stages, to be released at the theaters. We'll see it in IMAX. And my first question to you is, a Game of Thrones movie in the theaters, does that excite you, just knowing that and not even anything about what it might be about?
It excites me, but I mean, it is going to matter what it's about for me personally. But I mean, I think
fair enough.
You've seen HBO do this in the past. They did it with, I believe it was Sex and the City and Deadwood.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know if those came to theaters, but they came to HBO Max. So
they both did, I believe.
Yeah. So this isn't anything new, and I think Game of Thrones is their most successful franchise they ever had. So it doesn't surprise me. It's something I'd like to see.
Well, and we also combining this with the news today on a financial call that David Zaslav at Warner Brothers had, talking about how they're doubling down on their core hit franchises, right? So he specifically talked about gaming around the Harry Potter IP, Hogwarts Legacy, about DC, the DC Universe, and specifically Batman Arkham and other games. And then he talked about Mortal Kombat and then Game of Thrones. So we've got some Game of Thrones gaming coming out, which I'm pumped about. But that shows you that they're doubling down on the franchises that make money, including The Hunt for Gollum, Lord of the Rings. And so that's where the money is. That's where the revenue and the profit is. And a movie in the theater, you know, and sitting in IMAX, to me is exciting as a Game of Thrones fan. Let us know what you think while we're talking about this. Leave us those comments. Are you excited for a Game of Thrones movie? What movie will it be? What will the story be about? And that's where we tie into an article that Variety had written going back to last year, when Variety had talked about Mattson Tomlin, who's writing the Batman 2, or wrote the Batman 2 script, and Mattson Tomlin has been writing an Aegon the Conqueror series for HBO Max, which will probably be released after House of the Dragon Season 4 has wrapped. We could get it before that, but it probably will be after House of the Dragon finishes that story arc. And we have a Night of the Seven Kingdoms, which they may change the name of that to a Hedge Knight. But the Aegon the Conqueror series, tying into the first king, the first Targaryen king of Westeros, who united 6 of the 7 kingdoms because he didn't conquer Dorne. Covering that storyline leads us to believe that if this movie's being developed, that it could be about something that was a prequel to the arrival of Aegon the Conqueror. He was born on Dragonstone, but his family moved to Dragonstone because of a prophecy, a dream. One of the people in his family before him, Daenerys the Dreamer, had this dream that Valyria, where the Targaryens were from, which was in a peninsula surrounding 14 volcanoes, had this prophetic dream that Valyria was going to be destroyed. So they left Valyria and moved to Dragonstone. Of course, Valyria was destroyed. The 14 Flames, as they were known, torched all of the dragons in Valyria. It was called the Doom of Valyria. And so there's a lot of rumor flying around that this movie could be about the Doom of Valyria, which leads the Targaryens prior to the Doom to Westeros. And then they tie it up maybe in a nice, neat bow. And at the end of this Doom of Valyria movie, we see the Targaryens on Dragonstone and the birth of Aegon, which would lead us into Aegon's conquest, the show. That's the tie-in to why a Doom of Valyria movie might make sense. What do you think about that, Sterling?
I mean, I think that's something that nerds like us might be into, Game of Thrones fans. I don't know if that's something like the general public is going to go see with a big box office release. I think if they do something like that, that would be a good HBO Max exclusive, have that movie and then lead into their TV series. But as a, $100 million plus movie, if not more than that, I don't I don't know if that's going to bring in a lot of
They
the
have to watch the
casual
budget.
audience. Yeah, I mean that's going to be for dedicated fans of Game of Thrones, and I'm not sure there's a lot of them, but I mean I just don't know how much that audience is going to transfer over to a movie
And
theater
it's a
to see
story
that.
to tell. There's a lot of complexity to it. You know, the Valyria was the superpower. They were the United States of, you know, in the world of Song of Ice and Fire before we get to the events of Westeros. And so you talk about this Western Essos where they conquered. You've got the free cities, the Gistari, slaver bays, uh, you know, the River Rhine, all these things that you would have to introduce, and tons of dragons. I don't know how they would do that and keep the budget below $200 million. That would be tough.
Right.
And again, to your point, it'll be new characters, and you would have to have actors that maybe people recognize to get them to the theater, because outside the core Game of Thrones fans, people will be seeing a trailer that would be a new story that they're not familiar with. And so there's a risk there. Where would there not be risk? Where would, if you're trying to make a movie and you did not go down the road of the Doom of Valyria, let's say that the Aegon series is going to stand by itself on HBO Max and you were doing something separate, what would be something that you'd say that's going to make $1 billion?
Well, I mean, there's going to be risk no matter what, but I think their safest bet is probably a continuation, a sequel to the show. I think that's going to be their best bet.
To Game of Thrones after season 8.
Yeah, especially if you're keeping that name. I think that's your best bet.
Yeah, because if you do a Doom of Valyria and you look at the average from the shows they're doing now, which is 20 to 25 million an episode, you're looking at a $250 million movie without marketing for Doom of Valyria.
Right.
To your point, if you go and you show us Bran, the King Bran of the Six Kingdoms, Sophie Turner returning as Sansa, maybe Kit Harington as Jon Snow in the North with Tormund, Brienne of Tarth, Tyrion, Bronn, whether we see a resurrection of Daenerys and Volantis and we see Drogon, but we take the events and we do go 10 years in the future, people see them in a trailer, that's your safest bet for making a $1 billion plus movie or making a financially successful movie. I agree with you on that. Do I want to see that more than I want to see the Doom of Valyria? I don't know. It just depends on who the director is, the actors.
I think you see those actors are huge in that universe. They're not so big outside of Game of Thrones. So I think they're going to pull in a lot of fans, you know, as long as the Game of Thrones name is on their project. And I don't think they're going to be as expensive either. You would only have, you know, one dragon to render instead of, you know, tons. That's a lot of budget goes into that. So
it's going to be interesting to see what they choose. And then, of course, what's the involvement from a writing standpoint with George R. R. Martin? You know, the fans have gotten so frustrated that we don't have Winds of Winter. You know, if he gets involved in a movie, the only way the fans are going to be happy would be if it ties in with post season 8 of Game of Thrones, which most fans weren't happy with how it all ended. But I don't think anything's going to make the fans that love the books, happy. The only way they can be made happy is Winds of Winter has to come out.
Right.
And so, but you know, my prediction is that this movie's going to be tied in with Aegon, the series, and it's going to be the Doom of Valyria. I'm hoping that I'm wrong and that they actually do what you're saying and they go however many years in the future and they tell a story about Westeros and what happened with Bran as king, what happened in the North, what happened with Jon. And you get into some of the after effects of these decisions that we saw that ended Game of Thrones. And oh, by the way, is the threat from the White Walkers and the Night King, is it over? Do we see some sort of play into the baby that got touched in the face that was one of Craster's babies that the eyes turned blue? Was there a contingency plan that the Night King had to survive him?
No.
That would be cool to see if this really was just beginning with the Battle of Winterfell and there was more to it. There's a lot of possibilities. We wanted to cover the news. A Game of Thrones movie is fascinating to see if it makes it to the big screen and what that story would be. What do you think? If there's going to be a Game of Thrones movie, what is the story that you want to see? Do you want to see a movie at all in the theaters? Let us know what you think. While you're doing that, smash that like button, share this video out with your friends, and most importantly, hit subscribe so we can continue to grow our channel. And TCB.